하래. 당도 남좀 당한 저기 당한질래 아주 동할래 타네 안에 코비 동할래 타지 안 탈바다 템지 김벽고 막 톡고 그래. 대토발라 안 탑람 고메기 람디 람달 망보 예배는 쪼로식 마 뒤시 송바이나 달 람지 쪼 나바 숨스네 안에 뇌중기야다 뇌중고미야 되네 안에 자주 셈고 자주 셈 요구네 라지 안에 지금 된 동반이 또 베시라고미야 디숨보디 단 냠는 제고래 시사다 상교고바 토발라 저기 뇌중곰 자주 셈곰 동요도 베시랍 안 디토네 안에 아주 냠네 가르치나 도시고래서 디인자다 람요 쪼 나바 숨세디 다 도시나 가서 아주 디슈로아.
Good morning. Yesterday, we started to look at this text, the three principal aspects of the path, which presents the most skillful of techniques to eliminate all the sufferings of samsara and attain enlightenment, the state of greatest, lasting, stable happiness. There are many stages of training the mind in order to achieve enlightenment, but these have been condensed here into three: definite emergence, bodhicitta, and the correct view, the three principal aspects of the path. And all three of these, we are required to train in all three of these in order to achieve the final goal of enlightenment.
델리아 당한 주게 남섬나는 바직 칙 뒤휘제가 뒤휘제 안에 송제마도 된다 닝볼라 안에 남예림바 기부 중요 남예림바 다 징게 남예림바 기부 첨별 남예림바 된다 차상 디나를 창디고 디나데는 닝보디 수뒤시 송샤르바 지자 디네자데 뇌중 냠는 제고레스도 디나라 안에 기부 뇌중 냠는 기부 징게 남 냠는 제 송고로와 지산 기부 징기 남게 냠는 제발라 대령이라는 기부 중의 투모의 남이름으로 장화도 오늘 조고라 지자 될래 디 때네 안에 기부 중의 남이름 받으나 징게 남이름 받고 고토고래 당아서 단 자주심 냠는 제고래 세도 안에 될래야 가르소데 잡아침비게 취 냠는 자주심 안에 남 기부 침별 남이름 냠는 제다디 내가서는 아주기 자주심 산교고바 토발라 안기고 침별람 미리버 자주심 요구네 라지 냠네 제고자 자주심 냠네 제고레스 등이 자주심 세디 안디가소다 기고 침별람 미리만 남다 시고레 다 동요 도베 셰랍세디 지나 다 타바 토발라야 동요 도베 셰랍 공고고레 나 산교고바 토발라야 동요 도베 셰랍 공고 양다바 따와도 공고바 지바레 지나 딘나는 이가는 뒤고레 지나다 더드나 딘나네 기고 침비가서 람림기 가서 돈다닝보 차상시고 송거래.
Our text, the three principal aspects of the path, is very brief. It's just 14 verses. But within this brief text is the condensed meaning of all the stages of training that are required in order to achieve enlightenment. The trainings that are shared with the practitioner of initial capacity, the trainings that are shared with the practitioner of intermediate capacity, as well as the trainings that are unique to a practitioner of supreme capacity, are all included in these 14 verses. So we started to look yesterday at definite emergence. And definite emergence is the generation of, or training the mind in the generation of definite emergence. It starts with the trainings that are shared with the practitioner of initial capacity and progresses into the trainings of a practitioner of intermediate capacity. Thereafter, we'll come to look at how to cultivate bodhicitta. And bodhicitta is a unique training of the Mahayana Dharma. It's therefore, these are trainings that are unique to a practitioner of greatest capacity. And then the third principal aspect, that of the correct view, or the wisdom realizing emptiness. This is shared by both practitioners of intermediate as well as practitioners of supreme capacity. They both need to cultivate the self-same correct view, the self-same wisdom realizing emptiness. So in this way we can see that all three principal aspects of the path encompass the entire range of trainings, those of shared with a practitioner of initial capacity, those shared with a practitioner of intermediate capacity, and those that are unique to a practitioner of supreme capacity.
가르레 타서 코비 동안들이야 탈바시 그러와지 제가 탈바 톱고로봐 제가 탈바 톱발라 타바데 톱고도 셈베 되냐기 듬버 슉침보지 매바이나 니 톱발이야 베지지교 말와 제가 탈바 톱고도 셈베 삼로된 예중식으로와 제가 당아서 탈바데 코비 동안을 타고 인자 코비 동안들라 타고도 셈베게 듬버데 슉침보지 고고래 니고고래 니고 듬버 슉침보 여바이나 아니 코비 동안을 타야기 탑람들이야 베즈체 거래 근데 베즈체 바이나 코비 동안들 타투고로 봐 디인자 다 탈바던 이로 고고리에서 고 매중세에 기 고고리에서 김자로 제 뒤로 가상 가지고 쉬사로
Yesterday we also spoke about why it's essential that definite emergence needs to be cultivated in order to achieve liberation or enlightenment. What is the meaning then of liberation? What is it that one is liberated from? Well, this can be expressed in two ways, but with the same meaning. Liberated from the sufferings of samsara in their entirety, or in a more abbreviated form, liberation from samsara. That is what one is liberated from. And in order to attain a state where one has freedom from the sufferings of samsara, one has to transform one's way of thinking radically. And in order to be able to generate a sincere and transformative determination to attain liberation from the sufferings of samsara in its entirety, a powerful determination needs to be cultivated, a determination that is of such strength as well as continuity that it transforms our priorities in life and thereby our focus and our endeavors. And to bring that about, one has to generate the determination that is the mind of definite emergence, where one is definite about needing to emerge from the sufferings of samsara.
텔레이네 아주 내가 가르치베네 배나 저기 제모로시네 제모딩 하 제고도 선배 디 제모 나 주이싱 하 제모 제고도 선배 삼보 등이기 제게 듬보 슉침보 줘봐나 디 제모들 제모 제셋 디알이야 아니 레기 돈달라 아니 지게 장도로시야 되는 슉침보 비지지거와 디나싱 아주 가리나데로 앞에네 제모이나다 레가이나다 가리네 디가 제고도 선배기 돈이기 듬보 슉침보 줘봐나 디 레가디 제기 돈라 비지지거와 아주 사지질을 줘봐네 사지를 아디 사지디 인지 민지 로고도 선배기 빼지 듬보 슉침보 줘봐나 게디나 여봐나 사지들을 줘야기 탑람리아 가르가르 고구이메 차산 베지제제 타워 디두고와 제가 디네 상한 저기 지딘비게 내가 가르쳐본 딜이야 내가디 제게 પછી 내가들 돈여기 듬버면은 아니 내가디 유쇼선 자세그와 디나진 내가 가르이나 될 돈여기 듬버 슉침보 줘봐나 디기 돈여기 듬버 디기 긴 제지 슉긴 디기 제제네 디 내가디 주야려야 제헬이야 아니 거기서 베지제제 탑람 베지제용으로 베지제여도네 gelgel진 내가디 간라리 투구로와 디나진 지바래 당한저 탈바세야디 코에 동안을 드라이브 탈바세야디 톱고도 샘비게 돈얘기 슈침보 깨봐있나 데네 데레 톱이야기 돈알에 베지지구로 와데 돈아지바 차고로 와 저기
In society, in order to achieve anything extraordinary, a tremendous commitment to achieving that goal is required. Without such a commitment, nothing extraordinary is going to be achieved. We can think of the example that athletes set for us. They have a strong determination to be the very best they can be. And due to the strength of that determination, They readily overcome all obstacles. They train throughout the year, in all weather, no matter what obstacles there are and other things coming up in their life. They don't allow such events to overwhelm their determination because they have a particular goal they are determined to achieve. This isn't just the case in athletics, this is throughout our society. Whatever one wants to achieve, when one has developed a strong determination, one will then plan well, investigate well, and then strive to fulfill that plan as well and quickly as possible. And same here in our spiritual development. In order to radically transform our way of thinking, transform what we value in our life and where we're going to put all our energy and endeavor, just like an athlete who wants to become a world champion or someone who wants to succeed in another area of life, we need to develop a strong determination. And that determination, that aspiration to strive for liberation, is the mind of definite emergence.
다지 가사디가 좀 예전 거비 김전듯이 다들이 대마슈야디 당 예전 계획이 탑람 가능스 고무고래 삼마 가능스 땅고래 세디 디마 슈여와.
Yesterday then, we looked at the purpose or the need for definite emergence, and we've just reviewed that now. Now we come to the next verse, where we look at how to develop definite emergence, how to generate and sustain, or how to generate a sustained attitude that is definite about emerging from suffering and attaining the lasting happiness of liberation or enlightenment.
어디 뜻어 달저니가 셀라 롱메바 일라 건베 세디 나시도 레디 밀루 코르게 동안 남 야야 삼나 치메 나시도 사실 당한 저기 되대 탈바되니게 삼바케게 둠바케게 탑람 곰나데 송고래.
Come now to the fourth verse, which presents the method to cultivate the way of thinking that is definite emergence. This life of leisures and opportunities is difficult to find and has no duration. Through familiarity with this, attraction to the joys of this life cease. Repeatedly reflecting on actions, their inevitable results, and the misery of samsara, attraction to the pleasures of future lives also cease.
체디기 낭셰세다 체치민나 치민 낭셰세디 낭셰세 니용고래 지산데 체디 낭셰레네 체디기 자월 바 차바 지고래 체델이야 당아 저기 체델이야 안 지금 소소게 수부대고 영야 소소 수부대고 영야다 소소야 안 지기 튕기엔되게 야고 영야 되네게 삼다 안되게 소소게 땀년다 야고 영야 소소게 되네지 게라침보 자야다 어두스네 소소게다 유제 간에서 풍성소바 차상하지 라나 삼백이 될래야 현지 될래 차제 현차들라 안에 체디 낭시시고래 체디 낭시래 체디기 뒤엔라 차배 차네 제 차네 현백에 자신들을 숨고래.
This verse starts with making reference to our attachment for the pleasures and comforts of this and future lives. The comforts will be expressed perhaps as one's own physical well-being as well as often material comfort. And here we have a strong craving to experience and achieve ever more physical well-being and material comfort. So this is the meaning of being attached to the pleasures and comforts of this and future lives.
메다 라이고 봐 야고지게 될이야 안직 튕겐되게 야고용하다 늘류이되게 야고용야 될이야 안직 땀냐다 야고용야 개와 치말이야 되네기 삼다 될이야 자신게야다 되네지 개와 치마 사케라 치물이 오보 야신사다 되네기 파기월 되네기월 렘바인데 되네기 안직 류 돕슈 첨부여되게 안에 변조다 되네기 튕겐 차사 야고여되게 삼다야 delege cha an kewa chima mil kewa na an mi lumba dige an de chipombo chembo ta be ji wang chembo yehen dene chile kewa sembe dene ge cha shen de kewe chimege tsedi masan kewa chimagi an delia jige lada mil kawa kewa na delia jig benjo chembo da wang chembo da an so dam nyan da chembo yo de dene ge so so tünye chasan kare na pun so ba ji dene ge rana sembe dene ge dene le chabe cha shen de la
This craving for physical comfort and mental pleasures, this we have to experience in this life, but also in our future lives. For the aspiration to be reborn as a human or God, we tend to also have craving for having good conditions in our future lives, good material conditions, good physical health, to have a great reputation and perhaps power and influence. So this too, we express this craving and attachment for such situations, both in this and future lives.
망 채워라다 가시가시 마도 망 채워 가려선 세델이야 소수기 수부 대당 소수기 튕긴 가라이나 좀 되게 소수기 담년다 야보다 소수 빼면서 산다나네 소수 약쇼지 차액이 되니게 차산이야 되니게 되니게 될이야 되니 주나 선비기 될이야 차신지 여여버려도 와다가 차산을 여러와대 오늘 미 차산라.
This way of thinking really is pervasive in our world. It's a desire for material comfort, physical comfort, a good reputation. This is not something that even not uncommon. It really is pervasive in our world.
제가 소소랑 소부 대단요야다 소소야 안지게 튕긴되게 약고요야다 소수게 지게 담년자다 되게 요야게 된다라 당아서 내가로지 망치 내가데 디도나 장냥 지교로 와다가서 차사디로 와 가시네다 디도나리아 지게 내가래 병무사야다 안지게 제제야다 안 봐서 두스네 benjosa dene chamjang joya da dene lega ta maraj ji je da chasa di kor di don da la nga zugi je diga ji gor wa dang so.
Having this strong and pervasive craving for material and physical comfort and reputation and so forth, this tends to dominate our behavior. In order to achieve physical comfort and material abundance, we engage in ceaseless activities. And not only is this expressed physically, but mentally, our way of thinking is dominated by these desires and how to achieve them.
데니게 삼로치 착신 숙천보 주여반다 디 숙긴이 진행하서 체디기 데네기 되기 주디 용야게 돈달래가 장야 제마동아 주기다 코에 동안을 타지 탈바세 토구도 셈베 삼로기니 가서 고거 말 마코와디 끼인 가르치고 그러시는 다들 체디기 아니가 주기 데네기 데려야 차제 착신 숙천보 주여바지 니기 끼인 진행하서 개와 치마세야나 네 탈바세야데 삼로디 코르투고 말에 제산디 방아 주기 디기 끼엔지다 달려가되나 디던달라 즉 내가 제야 가시네 즉 고마고야 가시네 지금 지금 소소지야다 가시네 고헐다야라서 받아 즉 소소 도슈베제 다는 상 강아지야라서 차산 소소기다 담년다다 소소디기다 소소기 풍선 소바 차이게 된다 장야 제리고로 니네게 제제되는 거 지금 삼로디 슈킨제 내가 저기 삼로 되는 쉬어봐 인사 니기 끼엔제네 체디기 디자워 주였다나 양양 제제 탈바다 탐지해 봐야 돼 삼로코로 내가 저기 삼로 땅 두고 말아 되는 인자디 딩아 저기려다 체디기 낭신자야 돼 체텔라 디윤라 차베 낭신딩아 탈바 탐지해 봐 대시 내중기에게 삼로 끼야래야 바르시에서 올다디 고견지간 직디에서 올
Having this overwhelming attachment for happiness and pleasure of this life, this dominates our mental process, our thoughts, and therefore our behavior and our energy and our activities. And this then serves as a major impediment to even thinking about liberation. This is possibly the primary obstacle to generating definite emergence, because our thoughts are not on emerging from the sufferings of samsara, because we are seeing that there is, or we believe that there is pleasure to be obtained in samsara, and this dominates our every thought and activity. So what we find here is that our time and our energy is consumed by thought of happiness in this life. And whether the resulting behavior is virtuous or non-virtuous, there's a similarity in the result. Our time and our energy is consumed, and therefore our potential remains unfulfilled. Our potential to strive for and achieve liberation remains unfulfilled because of our desire for pleasure and happiness in this life.
Bendigo Cetilia, and Bendigo Nashin Chashin di Dores, Dilo Samlodi Ma Mavasu, Resure. Adini di Samlodi Mava Sushavana, and another Cetilia, another Digi Goro, and another Suputivo Core, another Sayatu Tungendike, Yatashi Kuore, Chesang di Corva, and did some of the Dorje, and another Cetilia Pe, Yonda, Nunga, Kanga, Shu Chasarova, did somebody nurture. It's
imperative that we abandon the attachment to mere worldly pleasures. But hearing this, though, commonly a doubt arises, and certainly in terms of trying to do this, people may make an error, thinking that if I need to abandon the attachment for worldly pleasures, how do I go about sustaining myself? And what about, do I not need then any favorable circumstances? Can I just ignore nutritious food, somewhere comfortable to live? So there's a need to look at the required balance here.
Delia Cetigi Nashe Dohuri Sidu Cedelia Sosugi Dewa Dube Dunya Antic Sosu Tingu Chazan Meva Sogore Sungo Marwa, Donda Karasungorsen, Ranzulia, Lui Dedan Gore, Carson Lui Dedan Mena, Azugi, Nyamlenche to Mare, Cezadayanjik, Lui Dedan Gobamaze, and Delia to Tungin the Gay Awash Mebene, Dian Tungi Kamazi and Azugi Church, Tarba Toya Tablam Pejala, Yungumari, Chezanazul, Subo Dedan Gore, Anzulia, Tungin the Yataja Kugur, Kugur, Ina, Danganos, Kugur, di Meva Sogor Sungomar, Delia Donda Carsone, said Digi Druya, the Tungin Druya, and said the Janjang some Deva and the Notary, or the Janjang some Gomares, said the Lesosu Subu Dedan, Tredentia. So you think you but Chazan Dup, Ding, and the Montpana, Tarba, Corvi Dunga Tala, Traje, Dingy, Deo, Tobegi, Disam of the Danje, Delia, and Gasore, Di Yonhagi Tablam de Bejucha or Yesumorda.
Here we use our intelligence, and we recognize that in order to spiritually develop, we need favorable circumstances. We need to be healthy, we need physical well-being, and we need a number of material comforts. So we need favorable circumstances. It's not that those conditions need to be abandoned. What needs to be abandoned is our way of thinking in relation to them. We need to and to do this, we need to recognize the amount of time and energy we put into thoughts of achieving happiness in this life, as well as the strength of these thoughts. And this is what we need to change. We need to change our relationship to material happiness, to worldly happiness. It's not that we need to abandon physical comfort, for example. We need to abandon our relationship, our attachment to physical comfort. This is what we need to put our attention to, and by doing so, we can then have the the mental space to change our focus from the achievement of mere worldly happiness to the attainment of liberation. So here, primarily talking about changing our perspective, our emphasis from mere worldly happiness to liberation.
Zandanga 저기 donda닝보디 세텔리아 소소소보 대상당 소소 튕긴 용야기 대세가 아니 지게 삼다디 주베 디디한래 조데 삼로 슉체에 가왔던 거라서네 예 코르에 동안에 주해제 타르바서 토부도 디토야게 don달이야 아니 가르가르 채우도지 삼로디 슉체에 됐던 거 그래서 대체 단 세텔리아 소소소보 대상 용야다 소소 튕긴 중에 디한 삼당고데 이내 디강양 삼마다시 딜레 삼로디 체디기 가지고 튕긴 주야다 수보된다 삼로 중화되지 치미게 아나 코에 동안에 타제 산 탈바세 토구도 선배기 토구도 선배 삼로디 슉체 당고 그래서 슈마 배제 저 그래서
In brief then, we do require the conditions for temporary happiness. What we need to change though is how we relate to them and come to recognize and then deal with our attachment, our craving for temporary happiness. Rather, on the basis of comfortable circumstances, we need to have our mental process focused on the attainment of liberation. So this is what we need to do. Transform our way of thinking. Rather than have a focus on transforming our outer world, we need to transform our inner world.
제가 당한 저기 지딘비 레가레산 삼다베네 아주 디링 레가레간 차상기 가르 삼다 레고 어서네 디링 자야도야다 디링 둘로 거야다 디링 기부 제기 돈달레 레가레고 말와 디 레가레야기 디링 레가레야기 돈다 미유데 가서 뭐바나 상인나의 제마 디 소소게 튕긴 주야다 소소게 디기 주야기 돈달라 아주 미유디 디신데 레가레고 마도 아주 디 레가레간 차상기 디링 자야도야 돈다 인 디링 지부인 삼고 말와 제사등 아주 람스 뭐바나 로제미 제마 마오바나 소소 부부 소소게 되기 두삼다제 마오베 삼다제 마오베게 야고용야게 돈달라 디리 레갈레야 차사 마오베 돈달 레갈레 삼다리기 오르와 지난 디난시 마오줄레 계주 주위에다 가르치는 중에도 마오바 아니 코르게 동안에 타지 마오바나 강아마야 마오바나 띵이 되와 토비하기 디삼다제 아니 가지고 냠는 제고래서 띵이 돈다 지과 차기도와
We can actually find a similarity in how we currently live our lives here, in that you go to work every day, but you don't go to work each day to earn just enough so that you can eat that night and pay the day's rent. We go to work with a longer term objective. We earn our salary so that we can continue to buy food, continue to pay for our mortgage, and maybe have some savings. So we have a longer term objective with why we engage in our endeavors. We don't live on a mere subsistence level. So we take a similar approach to engaging in virtue. We engage in virtue not just for happiness in this mere life, but to accumulate the causes so that we can progress towards liberation.
레갈레디 디링 지부고 사야도야데 디링 지부고 디네게 삼다지 레갈레벤데 고 레갈레고요 말와 가선 디링 사야이데 가상기니도 완 마트르시네 안 디링 조선 다야다 사야데 주되 지외데 버라 예여 버와 제가 상인나이 마음버게 삼마다지 디링 지부 삼다는 디링 디베제 다산데네 마음바데 마사데디네 마음바나 강아체 임버와 제상한도 디네 인상한 저기 레가 지딘벨레가 카르셰베나 디링 삼단고 말 마음버게 삼다지 레갈리고로 디나싱아 저기 나저 깨왕아치다 디기세 셈기티는 주고버에서 디주타디야 다데 지부 삼다지 세디냐냐 삼다 마려바지 딜레파 타릭스 몽바 네 삼다지 안도신 제화의 계침부에서 또 나닝 보디 디수와 세디 나시 도고레세.
The same way that if you go to the supermarket today and buy food, you're not buying that food with the money you earned this morning. Rather, it was the money that was the salary that was earned before the previous payday. So we see this throughout our life in that we plan and we prepare. This is now that's this technique we also need to apply here. we accumulate virtue, not just for results right now, but so that we can continue life after life spiritually developing to achieve the goals of liberation and enlightenment.
Delia, chimegi, that sedigi pa, chienchati pa, bang, chima dunyaki, chima kiawa, chima dunyaki, dumba di kiakurwata. Di yonalia, the diniki dumba di kiegi, donala, tabla mason, samnatana, and stangugure, city, tangan, some danda mason, ni ungoro, penang, Lobsang Yako Shingu Sibis, Lobsang Chayagi, Bezu Chevena, Lobsang Dunye Chedu, Delia, and Lobsang de la Yundens Tongerwa, or the Lobsang dishing by Ina, Lagatici to Gure, Ganga Casa Dice to Dini, and the Chiga, Sosugi, Di Cavacha, Sosu, Damianda Dion to Gore, Sosugi, and the Chigi, Benjamin, Dinner to Tugures and Bege. Lobsang di Yundens Tonge, Yunden Delia, Yundens Ba Daji Pa, Yundens, you wish Tongwena, Deep Dunyer Dumba, Lobsang Shag, Dunyer Dumba Yonta Chiche. Tis not Lobsang Chedu Kabla, Lobsang Shag, Lobsang Digi, Shingbaina, the Yunden did it in the Yores, Yunden some Daje, and the Chichedu, Lobsang Shag, Dunyer Dumba Chigligua. That's some Dana Chiglia, and my Gun Yichen some Daje. Other Lobsang Macha, but you do Stuhavana, Machine one, Gago Shingmaris, Shingmar, Machine Bana, and Jeman Suzuki, as you get Lagaragmare, Lagamaravan, Soso Lajiragmar, the Zayatuya Kanga, Duasaga Kanga, and the Chikalamare Kanga, me and the Chiki, Sosolia Miko was a me Toncho Taya Kanga, the Nekanga Lobsang Macha, and Kanga didn't Jungle, Jisan, the Nekanga Diki. Kanga delayed Tau was, Jisan Kanga di Tawala, and Sosugi, the Lobjo Yakuchi to Sembi, those Chenanga, the Lobjon Che, Lobjon Yendenji Tonje, Lobjon the Dunya Dumbakia, Jixia, Lobjon Majeba, and Kanga didn't in the Yunguri, Chisa, the Kanga, the Sewa, Lobjon the Kudu Sembi, some Tambo Kanga de Samta, Kanga de Sevi, Seala, Mayala, and it's Lobjon the Kudu Sembi, Dunya, Kanga and Samtane, Lobjon de Rayag Dunya Dumbakia Chiche. Lobjong Yunden de Samtaje and Dumbakita Chiche, Samtana Ni Tone, Lobjong de Dunyu Dumbakita, Shuchemboyede, and the Bejiela, Tablam Sona New Roda.
To give another illustration about how one in our daily life generates a strong motivation to achieve something, especially something that needs to be achieved over a long period of time. When one is thinking about the need to become educated in a particular field, this we know takes effort over a sustained period and perhaps some expense as well. So in order to engage with a sufficient continuity and strength of mind so as to achieve the desired result, one needs strong motivation. And to develop a strong motivation, there are two methods, and if both are employed, then it's much more likely a powerful and sustained motivation will arise. So firstly, one thinks of the benefits of becoming educated in this particular field and thinking of how it will improve one's life, perhaps help one in one's career, or maybe aid one's personal growth. One thinks of the many benefits that will come through being educated in a particular field. Then one conjoins that with the second method, which is to think about the loss that will come, or the faults that will come, through not being educated in this particular field. And here, then through reflecting on both the benefits and the faults of education, or the benefits of attaining the education, the faults of not attaining it, then through this twofold approach, a strong and lasting motivation will arise.
Tadi tele ya di sungor dangan zugi tadi di danjue nye ka tsela longme be ila kombe tsidi nashi do se de tsika ni di pashe gibu chungu gi lam yirimba do tumo lo jata de sungi sere jesa di janga ze gewa chima donyer ge tsidi nashi de pa do she gewa chima donyer ge samba ge de sungore jesa di ge la da kan samdang ge ore la da di se ore chemi tsidi ge nashi do haye de tablam kan samdang tabli do ore saji je da de danjue nye ka tsela longme ba 제대 다델이야 디공고에서 대주 안주게 땡디 David Dian Kosa Dawa Kedan, Joa Jutsan, Ludin Kevajan, setting on the Dindi. That didn't a Ludin de Bemas, Ludin Yabo, Dawa Kedan, Joa Jutsan, Din Kevajan Chatter, Esabe. That didn't Ludin de Bemas, top Tovelia, Yava Lea, Galaho Shures, Carasene, digging Gudela Yakusa, who is on Guyakosa, the Galaho Chagores. Daju Ludin Tovala, Ducaras and Tsurimson, Niejo Dumbe, Tsurimson, and there, and Jigam, Chimbada, Tsurim, Sebata, Sebala Sobege, Sebata, Jundela Sobege, then Denegi, Yamnekova, and Digalia, Molam, Yama, Maomba, and Denisi, or shorts, Molam Timam, but some Jawa, Saji, on Dusine, on Kuhores. Di saying as a Surum Soya Kaleha, what is a Shania Chitini, Zadang, as a Dajungi, that Lieutenant Daju Ludia, Bam, as a Sachimbu, Denig Tovia, Kaleha, Carson, Guya was our Gure, as a Begedan, Daju Ludin Delia, the Zachimo, some diety, and the Gumsen some diety, Chichawa, Daju. Daju Niaka said Daju the top go shoot, said. Daju do not chimbush, Daju Ludin Diobana, do not chimbush, you drove to said some died there.
Looking at the first two lines of the fourth verse, then, this life of leisures and opportunities is difficult to find and has no duration. Through familiarity with this, attraction to the joys of this life cease. So these first two lines are associated with the training shared with a practitioner of initial capacity. And through reflecting in the way mentioned in these two lines, serves to abandon or to overcome our attachment to the pleasures of this one life. Through recognizing the leisures and opportunities or the freedoms and endowments that we have attained, we come to recognize and appreciate the remarkable conditions that we have achieved. And this is important because we all too easily take for granted what we have achieved. We do so because we don't recognize the tremendous benefits that can come from this life, as well as we don't recognize how rare and difficult it is to have achieved what we've achieved. It is so rare because of how difficult it was to achieve what we have achieved. We need to reflect on these points so we can come to value this life that we have achieved because of the opportunities that come with it. In order to have achieved a rebirth that we have, a rebirth that is so rare even amongst humans, let alone amongst all beings, we needed in past lives to have to be extremely ethical, as well as generous, patient, and practice with great joy and continuity. And those four would have needed to be combined with prayer to have the particularly favorable rebirth that we have achieved. So those 5 causes, ethical restraint, generosity, patience, joy, perseverance, and prayer, we practiced those so well in the past that we've achieved this remarkable rebirth. And what makes it so remarkable is in particular what can be achieved in this life. The causes for liberation and enlightenment that we have the capacity to achieve. When we recognize this then, we come to value what we have attained, and we will not let it go to waste.
That Dorje said the Lieutenant, yeah, Gawa, the Yabu, didn't talk about the bear, that the niggy, that Lieutenant did the bears, do not chamber troop to war, then they do not chamber troop to wars, that do not chamber some Arjugi, Pene, that Lieutenant de la Dene, Arjugi, Sosugi, Dunga, Seare, and Egg troop to war, Dimase, Shanlia, Lieutenant de la Dene, Shanlia, Pemba, Robatia, Chitore, and the Lieutenant de la Dene, and the Lames and the Church, the Sosugi, Comja, and Yamenja, Lieutenant de la Dene, which is a Lieutenant Delia, Sosugi, Bejo, down, but the Shu, Bejo down 2 years, Nuba Shu, Resha, and Big, that do not chimba some diet, doing chimba some diet.
Reflecting then on the leisures and opportunities that we have attained, as well as their rarity because they were so difficult to achieve, and then lastly, the great benefit that comes from this, having achieved such a life. This leads to a great joy through recognizing what we've attained, and through this, a strength of mind, not to let it go to waste, but to rather fulfill our remarkable potential. And how to do so? To spiritually develop, because we have the capacity to accumulate the causes that will benefit us from lifetime to lifetime on the basis of this remarkable rebirth. And not only that, whilst we are accumulating these causes and spiritually developing, we can be of real benefit to others. So therefore, on the basis of this rebirth, tremendous benefit can come to ourselves and others.
퉁게 다 되는 차상 좀 돼야지 갈래하고 뉴뉴로와 뉴뉴 차고로와 되네서 담배는 둔로 당한 주 미류진으로 집에네 둔로 되게야 홀 류딩이 차네 지금 소소에 강화세야라 탑람제야라 신도네 뉴뉴로와 뉴뉴래 안에 지금 류딩이 차네 소소 롭정하다 신야데 장야데 갈래하고로와 세상은 좀 미리나 소소의 류딩이 차네 소소의 동화세야 사제 lum바 타르 뭐 가져 좋아나 좋아야 소소의 현재 차와로 주변에 니 사회 동화세야 탑람제야 안에 장모이나 장모의 세야기 동화를 들어 탑람 인디마제 생기 전에 시연 장야기 라비야기 되니기 지기 베제다 예디게 진지 라메스네 최슈야 예디바 곰자다 냠는체 차사 예디게 류딘 디기 다 캬바전데 된 캬바전에 시사데 류딘들 베조시 뭐 슈도 베 야고 슈지자데 되니기 아저 점블린달라 류딘 딜레 야가지데 다 용사 마레스베 두스네 아저기 단주 류딘데 자침부지야다 두시네 고 연된다 호롱기 뉴버로 주여바디 방안속에 두세 삼다데 삼당 호레세고.
If we compare the vast number of beings in our world that are in the animal kingdom to those which are human, we see there's a vast disparity. And if we look within human beings, or amongst human beings, we will see how rare there are those who have our remarkable circumstances. In order to have a rebirth such as ours, that is truly precious, a precious human rebirth, we have a rebirth free of mental impediments to spiritual development, as well as physical impediments to being able to engage in the Dharma. We also, especially when compared to animals, have remarkable intelligence to understand what brings harm and what brings benefit. Moreover, we don't have severe environmental restraints to being able to engage in Dharma practices, nor obstacles of location where the Dharma is not present anywhere near to where we live. And moreover then, we also have an ease of access to the Dharma and spiritual teachers. So recognizing these tremendous good qualities that we have achieved with our precious human rebirth, we come to see the great potential with this life, and that potential rests in our hands, and therefore it is up to us how well we utilize what remains of this life.
제가 첼라 롱메 봐서야 되려 되니게다 지오메다 봐서야 돼 중국으로 와가지고 기부 메니 기부 딩기 남기 중요 남기를 뭐 다지 기부 중요 남기를 뭐 시행하자 된 지오메다 봐서 그렇지 첼라 롱메 봐서 당아도 되니게 땡켜 봐선 되니게 야고 쉬우시래 네 가제 봐도 되기래서 로자타마 되기래서 로중업주 타마 되기래서 시 투여 말서 개디 시기래 게디 매바차 그랬으면 배당 안쪽에 시에토야 말서 진짜 게 마음솔이야 매바차래 게 망고요라서 그래서는 배는 뉴스타임 자야다 출로 자야다 안지게 로자야 토자야 라소바다 근데 막주게 게자다 지기 내나서 내미 게다 근데 칼라사다 마디비 토네 게자다 근데 그 람갈 조도 모터 답제셔 진짜 근데 그 마음솔이야 데니게 나zo 메바 차야야 베게 마고시 호슈요레 제가 데네 장한줄야 나 데니스 파르도 되기리에서 베 체리요 말에 체체로지 말라 곁곁한마 되기리 디니엘 가고 지금 말에서 베게 체메로 받아 제가 데네선 체를 롱요 말에서 체를 가제바도 되기리 가제바 되고 말에서 티시 투야요 말 끼인 가지 체스나 메바 차로 그래 제가 엘리 산이가 저 시기면 메바 차 자기 말을 납투해요 말아 제가 디네 인자 만들려 체들려 체를 롱요 게디시 메바요 말에서 체를 롱 메바스 디 김전되기도 제 삼당고 그래지래
The first part of the first line refers to the training in reflecting on the precious human rebirth. And the second part of the line is the training of the reflection on the impermanence of this life. And we see here that this life that was difficult to find has no duration. So on one level, we all recognize that we will eventually die. But innately, naturally, we all believe we have time. We all have this belief that there's still many years ahead of us, and that there probably will be good years ahead of us. But if we reflect well on the impermanence of this life, we'll see that we can say this with no certainty. In brief, there are many reasons, many causes that will bring about an unexpected end to our life, and so few that sustain it. We know from what we observe in society, or from people we know, that for environmental reasons, people unexpectedly die. Certainly through illness, people unexpectedly die, or accidents. So these befall people unexpectedly at any time. They can lead to death or severe injury that leads to one's life being turned upside down. We see here then, there are so many causes that bring about an unexpected end to our opportunity to spiritually develop, and so few that sustain our life. And in fact, in reality, there is no one that can say with complete certainty and accuracy that they won't die tonight. There's no one that can say with complete certainty that tomorrow morning I will wake up in the same body. We have no certainty as to the time of our death.
Gedi chingeme, chiwa ngeme, chiwa ngeba, chiwa negedi chikshiru res, shie de ngeba res, tachewa res, inada gedi shire, gedi shikure, chiwa la ngeme res, diba gomgo res, yila gombe gom.
The second line starts with, through familiarity with this. Familiarity is the same word as meditation. So we could also say through meditating and gaining familiarity on precious human rebirth, the leisures and opportunities, as well as that this life has no duration, so the impermanence of this life. Through meditating and gaining familiarity on these topics, coming to see that death is certain, but the time of death and the manner of death is completely uncertain, we can bring about transformation within ourselves.
Dine chi soba na zao yin meba chagir basana meba chago mar kewa chima yungure esewa da chewa chima yungure chesa kewa chima yo di dan nga zuge sedigi tin de la luden ya ko yo de gyu ya ko sa wala de yungure de dinaji kewa chima yo de gyu ya ko sa wa de yungure gyu da genje le de du po ba de kewa chima yungure zan kewa chima ge de ngandro dan dendro se ni ma do yo ma to ke sa de ni yo ma chesa ngandro sa de ngandro ni chike ngandro le kewa na luden gi chane ina dunga kanga se ma do yo ba an da de nga zuge chedi na shin 밀류리 뭐지 단주기 루팅 토바이나 되는 제디 나신 강아세 투야다 샹라 파도지 뉴바드니 용바 나신 개와 치마이나야 되니기 루팅 상포시 토베도 토고도 세베데 마토반다 대강아 용사를 제사디 토고도 세베 삼로디 리고로와 지난 디토 고도 선배 삼로 레어도 디 다디 토비하게 된다려야 안에 유 가르가르 싸고 그래 세배 삼로디 레고로와 유사야게 개하게 개주주게 레고로 예제래
Having gained certainty in the certainty of our death, but the uncertainty of the time of death, we then will naturally think about the life that follows. Recognizing that the life that follows, whether it's a comfortable life or a life of great suffering, depends on the causes that have previously been accumulated. Because we understand that there are only two directions one can take at the time of death. Either falling into the suffering lower realms or remaining in the upper realms. And this isn't a conscious decision that we can take. We cannot decide at the time of death, I will be reborn here or there. It is dependent on the karma that we've created, the causes that we have accumulated. So reflecting on this well in the sense that it brings about a transformation, will lead us to give rise to determination to utilize what remains of this life to accumulate the causes that are required to ensure that we achieve a good rebirth. Coming to that recognition then, we will seek out knowledge on what are the essential causes that we must accumulate to ensure a good future rebirth.
지사다게 제와치말에 데니기 띵캬바시 토고도 선배 삼로 숙체 삼로 기용도 나가저 체대단 제와치만이 가르기 체례 그래서는 제와치말이 기체와래 해서 그러다. 그래서는 기체와 인비 금전 가르라나 체디기 류딘디 단주 밀루르미주 톱사르고 매바차요 말마시 봐도 건서 류딘이 여대다. 맞아 가래 두네 땡들 두네 류딘이 캬바 여대 바래. 제와치매기 류딘디 톱기 라기 예면 nendeyo marwa soso dada beji gyu yabo saatune ragire soso gyu yabo masana dada gewadi len tuk marwa jesa dada shine gewa chimegi ludin khaba chendi tsedi ludin nashinji khaba chendi nganozola ragiro wada nendeyo marwa dada ludin de topsara ten khebarwa jesa gewa chimada dada ni jebeina gewa chimagi di raage dondale beji jede geche warwada gewa chimada geche warese 두 삼당에도 데네기 깨와 치마디 개체와래 류딘 캬바저래 개체와래 삼당에도 데 류딘데 라에게 don다라 개주르고 배 개체모이마 통한 거래 대단 디 개체모이마 데네게 삼러지 코는 거래 삼러 코고래 해지래
Having reflected in this way, our focus will shift. We will no longer see this life as so important, but we'll see future lives as much more important. And why? This precious human rebirth has already been achieved. We have attained it. But the rebirth that we will take in our next life is entirely uncertain. What form we'll be born into in our next life, what conditions we'll have, this is all completely unknown to us. Moreover, through the prior reflection on the precious human rebirth, understanding the great benefit that can be attained with having achieved the rebirth that we have, you'll want to ensure that we achieve such a rebirth, at least such a good rebirth, in our next life. And therefore, we will apply ourselves to accumulating the causes that will lead to such a good rebirth.
지변에 개와치는 빼면서 개침보단 배주침부 개체와 인바 삼코용도 제산 개와치마기 다 토백이 된다라 유사야디 냠는지야디 배주시는 냠는 지야기 dum발레용으로 와 딜레야도 가르쳐 와서는 개와 딜레야 대신에 마게 개와 딜레야 차선 숙성부여디 니도로 거다 가지 디면마셔 그래서 개와 침마게 삼도 어때 개와 침마를 야고電상보 토야 개와 침이게 된다 디제와 고도 선배 삼도 숙체 레제 니 된다라 비주 숙체만 레어도 다 체디가야 삼도게 삼로디 파도로 거다 가지 제산 세디게 나시 도 세디도 거쳐서 세디래 제자다 먼저 가서 어다 세디래 다다 먼저 딕타세를 디기도 깔 세디를 약간 뛰어서 최변에 개와 침마대 약을 줍투면 돼 디기도 선배지거로 와 당한 저기 레갈레나 나가로 와 제만의 약을 서서 디린 깔레 가서 내 깔레 개긴 선배기 깔레 개고로 와 깔레디파 깔레 마산바지라 그러 디나시 세델야 강아 주변에 델레 강아 마산바지 세티 치마기 된다 주비알이야 베수치에 제가도 제산 세델야 디자냐 세디기 디기가야 삼되드 삼로도 도로 그래 제산 자신의 도그래 제산 되네서 세디기 나신 자신의 도야라야 삼로도 스타베네 디도도 그래지래 삼당단 디레다 곰나디.
When you come to seeing our future lives as so much more important than this one mere life that we are enjoying now, our focus will shift. Our focus will shift from attaining the pleasures of this life to ensuring that we accumulate the causes that will ensure our future lives go well, and thereby our spiritual development can continue. And this, when one has repeatedly meditated on these points, that shift in focus will be sustained, and we will no longer be distracted by attaining the pleasures of this life. The pleasures of this life will be recognized for what they are, as fleetingless and of no real meaning. And our focus on accumulating the causes for good future rebirths will not be distracted by the pleasures of this life. So just like an athlete who is focused on becoming a champion, they will not be distracted by temporary benefits because they're striving to achieve this desired future goal. We will develop a similar strength of mind, but to achieve a goal of great benefit. And therefore, the pleasures of this life will no longer distract us, and certainly will no longer overwhelm us, because we have developed a far broader outlook.
나디 류가 이스미 예제된비 수름송이나 개와치마 안디 밀리터비게 규체거로와 지 수름송이 되래 안디가 알아야 안디 지기 진배냠는지야들이 네 랑랑그 류가 이스음 된 롱주 천년 샹리아 판바르 샹리아 땅야디 땅야게 삼당 안 라렌다야데 소소기도 강투도 파도 스타야디다 먼저 진배냠는지야 근데 쇠배냠는지야래 쇠바 쇠배냠는 제야돼. 되네. 근데 다 전직이 되네기 기회 차와라 가신 조시한의 전례제야. 안디나신 안디 마오바네야 안된상 지 된주 밀르르 뭐지 토버 쇼세야다. 안델야 안토베 된델야 라마단 제제 라미고되네야 안취시 안냠는지야 고급라 야보라와쇼 안능이디特别点点了，点点乡里啊，攀爬节前不主推个点点那个中二小是呗，啊都是那个从毛南家过来是，你那进出这么松，进北年来就随便年来尊重些，毛南都是那结巴一呢，你嘛就给我起码等于没有这么特别具体的，大概是这些活的是我。
Having given rise to this determination to accumulate the causes for good future rebirths, we then embark on developing those causes within our way of thinking. First and primarily, to ensure good rebirth, we need to have an ethical outlook. We need to restrain our mind from coming under the influence of the afflictions, and rather to ensure it stays virtuous. This is ethical restraint. Restraining our mind from coming under the influence of the afflictions and remaining on virtue. And in this way, not only through our mind being restrained, our speech and our physical behavior, this too, is restrained from being afflicted. And rather, our physical behavior, our verbal communication will be ethical. The second essential cause to accumulate is that of generosity. Generosity, again, is primarily a mental attitude to give and be of benefits, and is expressed not only mentally, but also through physical behavior and verbal speech. Generosity is most easily understood through material giving, but it's also is expressed through helping others. So therefore, material generosity is primarily a mental way of thinking that is also expressed physically and verbally. The third cause is that of patience. And patience is an attitude, a mind that remains undisturbed in the face of adversity. So whenever the afflictions arise, we remain calm and undisturbed and rather apply antidotes to them. And then fourthly, joyous perseverance, the mind that takes delight in virtue, and thereby we remain motivated to continue ever more accumulating virtue. So those are the four causes required for good rebirth, and they're rounded off with prayer. Prayers to receive good rebirth in life after life so we can continue our spiritual development, and to ensure that we can do so, in our prayers we also pray to continue to meet our spiritual teachers and the Buddha Dharma life after life. So these are the four causes as well as prayer that are required to receive good rebirths.
디디레 다 레제 밀루 코르웨 둥아남 야야 삼나 치메 나시도 서로 지산다 치미기 체 개와 치미기 담냐다다 코르던 규다 롱조 코르라 차베게 차바델야 차신 숙천보지 디도야랴 안에 가르삼당어서 렌제 삼당고레시 레제레 이체바다 이시기 투야다 레제게 삼당고레스 레제 세드 밀루어레스 되가서 규다 지원이디 육기하고지 개화시 싸바이나 내래 제부 디기용야 돼 타쳐버려 유 미개와 싸바이나 내래 제부 동아시 용요바 타쳐버려 그래서 유래 때네 제부도 용요바데 지기 때네 유래 때네 제부 용거데 봐 then 안전하게 레제 밀루아레스데 그 제부도 줍사바나 게 근데 개화지 때나 니 제부 동아시 용거레스나 디 용아 말레스 그 제부 대화 중거레스 그 밀루아와 밀루아는 마노라서 그러 딱다시 그런 tumba시리그래요. 유미게 와사제 제부 대화 용거선 디 용아요 말지다 유미게 와서는 제부 동아 용거래. 지다디 렌제 밀루와레스 유가레 사베네 디 제부 중요하 다 쳐버려서 그러다 레드 미루 어디 윤제 삼당 레게 삼당 거래서. 근데 레제게 되시고래.
Coming to the third and fourth line here, the focus moves on abandoning attachment to the pleasures of future lives. And it starts with reflecting on actions, their inevitable results. Here then the meditation moves to that on karma, or cause and effect, and coming to recognize that karma is inevitable, or we can say it's not deceptive, or it's infallible, which means that all the happiness we experience and will experience comes from virtue. And all the suffering we experience and will experience comes from non-virtue. And this is infallible. It is inevitable. Should all the non-virtue we accumulate result in suffering, all the virtue one accumulates results in pleasure.
진짜 레제 밀루사 어느 코르웨 동안 남세데 답변아 지게 밀리아 배 지게 벤저 첨부 왕나 첨부 지게 튕년 차상 좀 되게 코르망부르쇼 주여베네 미델리아 아니 가리오스네 수폴나스다 네나서 용구레 아니 지금 마기와 셈마기와 용구레 강아망고 태 용구로 와스 제가 니 강아태의 류네 나서 용하다 강아태다 소수게 된다 마주바 되니게 강아 동아용한테 차상 개왕 아마 규칙 싸발에 되는 용거를 규례 되는 용거. 제가 규례 디베레 싸바 될 때는 용거를 해야지. 근데 맨날 할게 베네 배 지금 하디게 지금 주주에 되게 수보로에 되게 쇼지 여베네 그런소리 동아요래. 님이 시루래. 제가 지차상 개왕 아메기 규례 되는 용거래. 제가 규례 돼서데 레레 밀루어래. 제가 되네서 yu digbi le tene junje ge le ye jebu kaze denegi ko wale ki tu ka de chine ya dunga le tharayo mar dunga gyu dunga chaba duji dunga se dunga sumshi yore negap da dunga meba ne ya gyu dunga yongore chaba duji dunga je yoyo bare 제가 dunga le tharayo mar kamsum kowa kanesi 지 깨봐 있나요 레다 녀모 온게 지 신실라 dunga le tharayo mar dunga ye rashi re sembe dunga yore sembe dosine samtango reje.
The line continues, repeatedly reflecting on actions, their inevitable results, and the misery of samsara. Reflecting on cause and effect, we then also reflect on the sufferings of samsara. And this is imperative to do, recognize our own suffering, but also to be more aware of the suffering of others, especially if there are others that we aspire to, we long to be like. So for example, we need to be perfectly clear that even those in our world who are wealthy, those who are powerful and influential, that doesn't bring them happiness. They still suffer from illness, they still suffer from conflict with others, anger arising within themselves, struggling to form close and trusting relationships with others, and so forth. So even those in our human world who appear to have achieved the causes for worldly happiness, they suffer too, and they suffer in similar ways to what we do. And all the suffering they experience comes about for the same reasons as our own suffering. Previously accumulated non-virtue ripens in suffering. And when one is suffering, it's all too easy, especially if one is not skillful, to accumulate further causes that will lead in the future to further suffering. And this isn't just the case amongst humans and those in the lower realms, but also those amongst gods. They suffer too, especially, for example, at the time of death. And the reality is that as long as one remains bound in the suffering realms of samsara, one will suffer. One will suffer from physical and mental pain, one will suffer from transient happiness, and one will experience all-pervasive suffering. As long as one continues to take uncontrolled rebirth, which is due to contaminated karma and the afflictions, we will suffer.
Anda denigi ganeski ine da dunga yirashin jesha denigi dunga dige ne karachi yunguresen 지난 유단 genjile döne yungurmadu yudan gen mebade dene yosingi mares 지난 유단 genle dene yungor da yudi karesne le 대하 gen le 대한 유 가르쳐서는 녀모바 안 녀모바데 저 가르쳐서는 당한도 다세 마리 봐서 차교레스 지나다 다세 마리 봐서 나즈 마리 봐서는 nga sebe nga sebe samlo sta이도 갈라 nga 세디 갈라야마도 랑용원이 주바나 되긴지 난걸 지나와나 요래선 진비기 진바들라 다세 마리 봐서 그래 지난 니기 gen제네 아니 녀모바게 gen제네 다 레사 때 레기 온게다 마서 두시는 기억하와리 개와리 용거레스 지자 되니 인자 되니기 레데 온게 개와렌 치젤라다 내가 대화로 통배네 자와기는 대화 민두스 동아이 라시레샤스 센스 두섬다데 베나가 저기 두섬다다가 저기 미체보다 베네직 시에 땅을 나서 바당에서 잼 때문에 타고는 빼게라 침보슈다 안에 본보 게라 침보슈 먼저 파데도 오다 컨저 빼게 게라 침보래 미 약보래 미차상에 지구 지고래 변조 약보래 컨저 기우시고래 배가 저기 이문로시 기고로 와다 나 삼는 약보시다나 디당 안소니 디둥하 수치에서 컨저로 둥하 체여래 가르세나 본보 침보되게 파수로도 가르고도 컨저리야 구송하고 구도와 디 구송화대 라제 맴나 해내지네 구송하고 구도와 고송급 제고도와 가르선 델이야 드라마가 유베 따로와 다 드라마가 같이 있는 디네 구송화 튀게도 셈버딜이야 남라다 셰나다 지기우시 호마르바 나주 편에 기우르 내가 파수로도 구송화 수지를 소지부로나 저지 수지 잔용어와 진짜 두삼다베네 나중에 삼로다하다 독초를 차려서죠. 건설이야 되시 민주시 현代경제에서는 배워 차야다. 현재 직차 지여로 받아 변조로 되 총로는 야지 강아. 안직 퍼기 자기 미기 잔심 전도지가 망아. 뇌세지가 망아. 경제지가 망아. 안직 데니기 토네 안직 레가드 비도에게 냥아. Denigi Gabe, Shuchamo, Jagger, Tangas, sometimes didn't your Malawa. Says an answer you pop, yes, even Jedi, some Yawash, then Doxo Chatty Chagor. Dinashing out to Koala like Yawada, Bear Chikiawach, Makiawach, wouldn't pay our Diniki or sometime, deal it Doxo Chatty Chagor.
All the misery in samsara has come about independent on causes. And those causes will be the wide variety of contaminated karma. And contaminated karma, whilst is the cause for suffering, it too comes about independence from causes. And that is the variety of afflicted minds. And these afflicted minds too have a cause. Their cause is the ignorance of self-grasping. The ignorance of self-grasping being a consciousness that grasps at the self as existing by way of its own nature. And this consciousness is grasping at the self as existing in a way that it does not. So it's a consciousness contrary to reality, and therefore it is an ignorance. Because it grasps at the self as if it existed in the way that it appears, which is as if it is self-existent. And this ignorance of self-grasping is the root cause that keeps us bound in the suffering realms of samsara. It's a root cause that keeps all ordinary beings bound within the suffering realms of samsara. In addition to recognizing this, we need to recognize that this is pervasive. Whomever one is, wherever one is born, as long as one is within samsara, one will suffer. Because as ordinary people, we tend to look at those who are more famous and have greater power and wealth with some envy, wishing that we have what they have. And this too is ignorant. Someone who's famous, perhaps an entertainer, or someone with great power, such as a senior politician, or someone with great wealth, perhaps a titan of industry, we look at them with some envy. But this is ignorant. We need to think about the actual situation. We all value our freedom so much. But these are people who are surrounded by security, that there's always a concern that someone may harm them. This we don't have. Likewise, whilst everyone suffers from praise and criticism, for people so in the public light, the public spotlight, every decision they take, every move every decision they take, all that they do, is greatly criticized or critiqued. And maybe sometimes they'll be praised, sometimes they are not. And this is suffering to an extent that we do not have. Also, they are greatly competitive, and others are greatly competitive with them. They know that should they fail, many people will rejoice. This too we don't have. So when you think clearly, again and again, we'll see that their situation is actually the opposite of what we expect it to be. We think that someone who's famous or powerful or wealthy, they're happy, that they have more freedom than us. But that actually is not the case in reality. So we need to reflect this way to see the pervasiveness of suffering in samsara, and that there is nothing worthy of striving for within samsara, because nothing will lead to lasting happiness.
Adu chene khowala kawa kewe ne da dunga dende resha sembe dende du shimju cheba che shimju che cheba che du samta de kabla an garse wasna ada khowala ya kawa ke de ne le da nyomo ke chinje la ningbo skai mendu sembe ningbo mendu sembe samla ligoro dende ningbo mendu sembe samla de chimal ya be chimigi dende ke 대시 셰바는 변조하다 왕다 전부 되니기 라야기 배직 현자 전부디 된 매가 도르고 그래서 치마 개와 치마 강도 개바 이나야 레다 녀모 원기 친절라 동아에 라시나 강아 되니마도 민도와 선배 삼당에도 되네 개와 치마야 안에지기 자신 숙천부디 매가 도르고 그래서 나디네 도반자는 가르리그레스네 되네 베네 양양 삼나서로와 양양 삼나 치매 나시도 세디 대시 레균에다 kowa kanto kena dungayi rajnu che cheba che gyumzen samda tu che yana yana samda yodu ane gom yodu ane kewe chima leda nyomo wongi kewa kawa lemba ina ya kanesi lemba ina delia ningbo mindu sembe samlo di yungure de yodo ane kewa chima la shencha shukchimbo di dogure esire.
Thinking in this way repeatedly again and again, we'll come to recognize that wherever we are born, as long as we remain a samsaric being, we are born without any control or freedom because of the power of contaminated karma accumulated by our own afflictions. And therefore, every experience that we have, pleasurable experience we have, this too is tainted by our afflictions. And therefore, no happiness that we experience in samsara, that is possible to be experienced in samsara, is lasting. And therefore, there is no essence worthy of striving for in samsara. There's nothing worthy of longing for in samsara because at its heart it is corrupted, it is tainted by the afflictions. Only a state of liberation is free of the taint of the afflictions. Reflecting well on this leads to a change in our values, our priorities. And then the fourth line, repeatedly reflecting on actions, their inevitable results, and the misery of samsara, attraction to the pleasures of future lives also cease. What ceases here is the attachment for the pleasures of our future lives, because we come to recognize that all pleasurable experiences in samsara, whether in this or future lives, in any of the realms of samsara, has no worthwhile essence. It's tainted, polluted by the afflictions. And therefore, all that is worthy of our focus and our endeavors is our spiritual development.
Adine samnyane yando dustan edu da korbi kando keba na ningbo mindu sembe samlo chile edu chime na keba chime ge dine shencha do rugures da dine ane garje orsin da chizan danda le da nyomo ongi keba kando le ningbo mindu samyo de ane garje ores samlo garli geresne da ningbo de garres da de ligro da tengi dewa ningbo di kanga juni me ningbo ye de garre labde da le da nyomo mo kyewa de bang song ba na bang ba na le da nyomo mo kyewa le yu ku dunga ji ywa ye gi gyu de gar se le da dunga de le tar go go re dunga tha wa la dunga ji gyu de bang go res dunga gyu de gar se le da nyomo ba re shas nyomo ba na ne zo da se ma re pa sa chi re shas chi sa da le da nyomo ba da se ma re pa de bang go de di bang song ba na bang se bang me ba se ba na da ko wa le kyewa yo ma re de ni na anti 띵이 되어버려서 띵이 되어 투구래서 다 고발에 깨와 매봐서 깨와 랭이로 와라네 디 깨와 랭이래 다디 깨와 바식래 되네 깨와 랭이 제거와 깨와 짱짱래 되네 깨와 랭이지마도 레다 녀모 봐라 마트에 깨와 바식래 되네 깨와 랭바 제거 디 깨와 랭바인다 깨와 바식래 되네 깨와 데보데 디기마도 요 말아 되어 세상 깨와 짱짱래 되는 유 깨와 마도 현다 가야 메디인지 깨와 짱짱래 되는 깨와 랭바인다 디다 띵게 게디나 대화네 대화마 동아 가야메레스 진짜 디네 인사다 동아요 주 레다 녀모 빵베 빵바세 빵베 타르바세 토고도 선배게다 돈이 듬바들이게 되시네.
Repeatedly reflecting in the way presented here over a sustained period, we'll come to recognize that samsara has no essence. There is no rebirth within samsara. There is no experience in samsara that can lead to lasting happiness. All forms of pleasure in samsara fade and lead us to desiring only more and therefore compounding our suffering. Thinking like this, we'll turn away from striving for, desiring the pleasures of samsara. We'll see them in their true light, as insignificant, unimportant, because they have no lasting value. Then what does lead to lasting happiness? Well, why samsara has no essence, why the happiness of samsara has no value, is because it's tainted by the afflictions. When the afflictions are removed, one is liberated from samsara. When the afflictions, together with their seeds, are entirely abandoned, lasting, stable happiness of liberation is achieved. And this is because it's contaminated karma that ripens into our continuous suffering experiences in samsara. And contaminated karma is accumulated by the afflictions, with the root cause of all the afflictions, the ignorance of self-grasping. When this is eradicated together with their seeds, we are freed from samsara. And therefore, with no contaminated karma ripening, and no contaminated karma being accumulated through the rital of the afflictions, lasting, stable happiness is experienced. A happiness that isn't punctuated by even the briefest moment of slight discontent. And this is because of the complete absence of the afflicted minds. So recognizing this, we develop a determination to emerge from the suffering realms of samsara through abandoning the afflictions, in particular, the ignorance of self-grasping.
디링이 루틴 켜바전 토저데 된주 루즈모 쳐토베 마서 약고인텔이야 안지곰 냠는 가르체베네 제투에기 뉴바데니 셔바투 선베게다 자침보다 뉴바침보여 바딩아 또 쳤삼다 안 디링 저다 디네자 다디네 아지 지글레라완자 그지는 수수게 계셔 마주바제 매바 차송바이나 개와 치마들이야 안 디네기 라야데 깔라카고레 대엔사다 체델이야 디네기 지글라와레 마지베 마라들이야 그 뒤에데 내가 될이야 아니 계셔 강도도 주기 선베게 제가 세디냐야 삼마다와제 치마에기 띠엔 캬바전 라야기 치마이네야 계주 주비에게 샹레 판도 지어바다 자주 샘다 람냠네 지에게 띠엔 캬바전 토요에 된다라야 아니 냠네 그 계주 주기 선베게 삼다 디엔자다 가지고 룽아 이수묘관에 샹라 뇌바사데 직직미 선베 류 추림 송기사 소야다 아니 지게 진비에 냠나지야 쇠바다 전주기 냠나지야다 안 소소가 몰람져야지 도시의 개와 치마나 땡겨버전 토바다 라메기 안에지 야고니 라마 야고지 제바 라메 두고되네 최냠네 고갑 냐 로장지야를 고가라와쇼 곰냠나지야기 고비라와쇼세 몰람져야지 먼저 도시의 치매 나셔 되게 삼다나 직제 가사 체디기 나셔 되게 삼다나 직제 나 곰잡다 다케와 치미 나시도야데 맞아 레다 녀모며 코와라야 강로 깨바이나 동아게 라시레샤 당아주 체델이야 지카시 기보다 되네 통화데 되네 통고데 이내야 지 심주 제바이나 동아게 라시 강아 라시레샤 제사 되네사 깨와 레다 녀모 온거 코와라기 친제들라 동아레마도 민도 제사 되네자 다 깨와 치마 되네기 깨라 첨보다 되네게 지 왕다 첨보 변조 첨보 여발에 니보스카이 민도아스 좀 도시 삼다 디네인자다 가르고스네 델레타리 코르 동아 타달을 너의 귀디레다 녀모바데를 거 제산데 그 귀디레 귀레다 녀모바인데 빵비 타르바세 등이 토브라지기 산베게 데삼다야들이 디삼다야 가서 디링기 셰디기 당아서 곰냠네세데 디삼노디 야네 야동아서 심바지네 야네 야도 땅 로려야 가지 땅 고메데로 가지 곰바이네 로디 뉴바 쳇시 슉쳇시 주고와 로디 가지 뉴바 디네게 삼로 뉴바 슉쳇 주베 긴이 나저게 기베 자오 주비하다 차산 될래야 아니 자와딘 주비할래야 베즈체다 뉴바 체용도 거와 와다 디링 아주 쇼게셰디 디제 나디만 인고 가르쳐서 당예중 기에게 체디는 질리는 예중 기와래 사실 어두시 된 마셔야지
We'll conclude then our session for this morning here. To summarize then the meditation that I encourage you to engage in is that it's imperative that we abandon our desire for the pleasures and comforts of this and future lives. The way that this is done is through changing our outlook transforming what we value and thereby prioritize. So as the text mentioned, we need to first recognize the great value of this precious human rebirth that we've achieved. We do so through reflecting on how rare it is. And it's rare because it was so difficult to achieve, because the causes are difficult to cultivate. And thirdly, its great meaning, its great potential. And this is crucial to think about. What we have achieved and what we can do with it. Thereafter, we remind ourselves, though, that we do not have a length of time. Our circumstances can greatly change and death can also come. This life is impermanent. Our good conditions are impermanent. So therefore, we need to apply ourselves right now. And we need to do so consistently to accumulating the causes that will ensure that we achieve good rebirths, life after life, which means we need to apply ourselves to accumulating virtue. And this is done through taking control of our own minds and ensuring our mind is virtuous, and thereby our speech and our physical behavior will be too. And keeping our mind virtuous we can look at in 4 ways. First is keeping the mind ethical. In other words, ethical restraint, restraining the mind from coming under the influence of the afflictions, but rather ensure it stays virtuous, and thereby our body and our physical behavior and our speech will be virtuous too. Secondly, developing a generous outlook, the wish to give and benefit others. Thirdly, patience. Fourthly, joyous perseverance. And finally, that of making prayer. Prayers, including that we continue to come under the care of qualified spiritual teacher life after life, as well as meet the Buddha Dharma, and to have the opportunity to receive the teachings from our teacher, and have the capacity to meditate on them. In other words, to have the conditions similar to what we have right now. So therefore, don't let this go to waste. Utilize it well. Thereafter, reflect well on the sufferings of samsara, how they pervade cyclic existence. Reflect well that there is no one within samsara that is experiencing actual happiness, real happiness, true happiness. No matter how much fame or power, influence or wealth someone has, none of that leads to happiness. And any happiness they experience is in fact no difference from the pleasure we experience, in that it's transitory and it's tainted by the afflictions. So therefore, there's nothing, no rebirth or event in cyclic existence that's worth longing for and striving for. All that is of great value is the attainment of freedom from samsara. And all the suffering that beings experience comes about in dependence on contaminated karma that itself was accumulated due to the motivating minds of the afflictions. And these all come from a root cause, the ignorance of self-grasping. And this is what we need to strive to abandon. So that's the meditation I encourage you to engage in now. And through engaging in this meditation repeatedly over a sustained period, ever stronger familiarity with this way of thinking will grow. And the habituation to being distracted and striving for the pleasures of this mere life or future lives, this will be reduced and eventually overcome. So I encourage you to engage in this meditation. And this afternoon we'll come to the next verse on definite emergence, and that is how to know what is the mark or the sign of definite emergence having arisen within one. So we'll look at that this afternoon. So thank you very much. Thank you.